All right, so I'm here with Rebecca McConville. Is that how you say your name correctly?
Yep, McConville.
And she is a registered dietitian. She's also a CSSD, which stands for Certified Specialist in Sports Dietetics. And then she's also a certified eating disorder specialist, which is a huge deal these days. It's kind of out of control. Probably been out of control for a long time. We just recognize it more and more now, especially amongst athletes. But you created basically an idea, unless you've got it from somewhere else. I haven't seen it anywhere else. But this RED, I wouldn't say, maybe it's not just an idea, but it's like something that happens and something you can work your way out of or work your way into. Can you kind of tell us what exactly that is?
So I did not come up with the definition of REDS. It's actually an expansion from what was known as the female athlete triad, which was a trifecta of amenorrhea, which is the loss of 3 menstrual cycles, a weight loss, and then stress fracture. Well, in 2015, the IOC, one, realized we excluded males. And 2, we're missing the rest of the bodily functions that could be impacted by energy deficit. And so what REDS basically is that and I like to use terms that people can relate to at any age. And so I talk about things in terms of money. And it's basically like, if you don't have enough money to pay your energy bills, who's paying it? So at first you can use some of your savings account, which will be your body fat, your liver, your muscle. But eventually the body doesn't like that and slams the brakes on and starts saying like, oh, we got to have this for an emergency fund. What can we start dimming? And then we see this systemic response where digestion gets impacted, sleep gets impacted. We see more connective tissue, ligament injury. Eventually things just completely shut off. So your menstrual cycle shuts off. For males, we'll see a drop in testosterone. We'll see really dysfunctional gut related issues. We'll see lab markers like iron and vitamin D that become really low until that person really starts to feel fatigue, or unfortunately, a lot of times they come to see me because they have stress fractures. And so they're wanting to get back into running. The tricky part is those are easy to spot and identify, but that usually means that athlete's been in like an energy deficit for 6 to 9 months. My goal as a clinician is to teach the athlete, parent, coach, whoever, and the clinician treating to look at some of the more proactive earlier signs. That way we can catch it before we get to, a season ending injury or, really depressive state, because the brain needs fuel to feel. So the goal is that just like our bank account, we need to have energy available and we need to kind of keep it at a small surplus. That way the body has the energy to do what it needs to do in any given day. So sorry, I unloaded a big definition there.
Great. So what's the athlete, or the coach or the parent, before you ever get to that relative energy deficit in sport, the RED, what is the thing you could be looking for or watching for, way ahead of that, before that actually is a problem?
Absolutely. One, I always start with the why. So if that athlete is wanting to make some changes, either to the amount of food that they're eating, to the type of food, if they're struggling with progressing and training as they should, why? Is it because really you're getting tired because you're not eating enough? So you're thinking, oh, I might need to cut this out, or I might need to, we've got this whole lighter is faster belief, especially in endurance sports. So sometimes then they start focusing on that. The other thing is, we cannot find accurate information, especially for adolescent athletes, as to how much caloric needs they have. And so diet culture really gets wrapped around that, and most everything that they look, if they use MyFitnessPal or something else, is going to be on the low end. it doesn't have to be this drastic decrease or error in calories. 250 to 300 calories is all it takes to kind of start this dysfunction in the body. That could be grabbing a different bar at the grocery store for the week that has that caloric difference, or maybe forgetting your afternoon snack when you're busy, that the body will start to feel some of those negative consequences.
Gotcha. So would you say that the main driver is the caloric restriction?
That, and then the energy expenditure. So most of the time we're not going to get athletes or coaches to back off on the amount of training. So it's usually that they don't match. So I, in reverse, use the FIT principle. So if they are having a change in frequency of training, they probably need to eat more. If the intensity is going up in training, they need to eat more. If time and type. And so if I can get that athlete at the foundation part of their training, we will actually flag when they need to make sure that they're eating more, and then what that would look like, whether it's changes in snacks, whether if they're in a place that we can talk calories. I don't want my athletes tracking, but it helps them time to say like, okay, you probably need to add an extra 100 a day to make up for what you're expending. We're just not taught that. We're not taught that as an athlete. We're not even taught that as a clinician to match that. We're just kind of like, oh, here's your meal plan or here's your calorie goal, but it has to be adjusted continuously through the training process.
Gotcha. And did you personally have an experience with this when you were training?
Yeah, when I was in college, it was, I played basketball, and it was one of those things where I had the running to be the starting point guard. And so you're always like, what could be that competitive edge? And our coach really liked endurance. So it was kind of odd. We had like the time mile and we'd have time 200s.
Yeah.
And so I started getting faster, but then it was like, ooh, maybe if I watch what I eat, that will help me even get faster. And just starts out innocent, but the next thing you know, you're like, where was I at? Didn't have my cycle. I was struggling with a broken rib that wasn't healing. And while I got faster, I lost my strength on the court. I lost my reaction time. So I actually started playing poorer. Wow. But I got missed by so many clinicians. So I went to go to a blood drive when I was on campus and actually got denied because I was anemic. And then they said, follow up with your primary care. Go get started on iron supplement. Had always been dealing with irritable bowel syndrome. It really flared up. And then it was like, oh, it's because you're on the iron supplement. Got dismissed there. Was in and out of the training room trying to recover from this rib injury that nobody really asked, like, what are you doing to help your body heal? And that's where I know it's easy when you're looking at things in parts to get overlooked. But why, as holistic clinicians, we have to be talking from head to toe with those athletes. Like, what is your body telling you?
Yeah. And so, yeah, for the female athlete who has lost their menstrual cycle, what do you say to them that like, this is what's happening because of that? What's the down? A lot of female athletes I see, they're kind of like pumped. They're like, this is great. I'm a menstrual cycle. Don't have to worry about like game day happens, race happens. That's not going to happen. But what do you tell them to encourage them that like that's kind of like an insane value to maintain that?
Yeah. So they're not going to relate to, at that point, probably fertility. They're not caring about being in the childbearing age. But what I do explain to them is like, let's see, a stress fracture usually means at most 8 to 12 weeks out of your sport. They usually occur in the latter part of your season, which is usually what? Championships, districts, whatever. Yeah. So I'll start talking that, and I'll be like, the other part too is like when you don't have a cycle, estrogen goes down, which also is a dilator in the heart, and that helps us have more blood flowing, so we get more via our VO2 max is improved. So I'll start changing my language to get them close by talking about performance. Good. But then eventually discussing like, even though these cycles are not our favorite, they are a marker of health. They should be treated like a vital sign, like everything else. And you have to have it as an athlete. And that's where I really talk about, we must put the health first of athlete. And I honestly feel like that has been neglected.
And so do you feel like you're able to, inspire, motivate, convince either the coaches or athletes that truly you could get more out of what you're doing? Like in the long run, you're going to get more out of your performance, your longevity, even for people that are highly competitive. If you follow those rules, and so for a female especially, like you maintain your menstrual cycle on a consistent basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple months ago, there was a really good study where they interviewed, I think it was up to 230 elite athletes, and they wanted to see, okay, like what are the characteristics of consistent top-notch performance? So the number one was consecutive training. Well, one of the biggest drivers was illness, injuries,
Yeah.
and mental health. And so most of them were eumenoric, meaning they kept their cycle. They actually were at a higher BMI than those that had less consecutive training sessions, and they had more PRs. So sometimes the reason people are pushing and towing that line of eating too little or trying to get lighter or thinking a cycle is not necessary, we're actually seeing the data that you perform better when you're in a healthier state.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you, I don't know offhand if there's any, I mean, it sounds like there's some data there, but I know in the CrossFit community, so the gentleman, Matt Frazier, who's won the CrossFit Games the last 5 years, he doesn't look nearly as jacked. I mean, of course he's insanely fit, but like there's other guys that look like just, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're just like, oh my goodness, just veins popping out everywhere. And, just so cut. But yet this guy keeps winning, year after year after year. Do you know of much? Are you able to convince clients of that at all? Of, hey, it's you being just ripped out of your mind isn't what's going to help you, unless you're in a bodybuilding show, isn't probably what's going to do it for you on the course versus you just being super healthy.
Yeah, that's where you can sort out the athlete that might be struggling with an eating disorder. They're not going to be able to hear you because there's so much body image distortion and dysmorphia that they firmly believe that that's key for their performance. But I'll start giving examples. I'll be like, one, you can't see fitness, right? It's the action that you do. The other is most everybody knows who Tom Brady is. Even our runners know who Tom Brady is. And I joke about how, like, at the combine, and I use this in some of my presentations, he's got these big baggy shorts on. He's got a little bit of a belly hanging over, didn't meet any of the numbers in body comp that normally these guys would, but he's the GOAT.
Yeah.
So, it's the intersection between body image and sport, what we think a certain athlete should look like, the body image in society. And sometimes those end up kind of creating a U-turn, and that athlete is really caught up in what society says you should look like that has nothing to do with your performance.
Yeah. And I mean, does it take, for somebody who's caught up in that body dysmorphia, is that days, weeks, months, years of working with them to get them to change, or is it, or to see a different way, or is there a particular, is there books you give them, or like anything particular you say, okay, like look into this more, or other than Tom Brady, which is a great example?
Yeah. So there, for males, I love the Adonis Complex. It's actually an older book that really did a good job of kind of calling out the gym culture and basically even like the evolution of G.I. Joe, how he went from like John Wayne to military to now, this itty bitty waist with massive biceps, kind of like you said, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. For females, there's several books that I really like: Body Beautiful, Body Kindness, Mom in the Mirror for those that have children, but also doing a social media audit. Like, who are you following and why? And the truth is that a lot of times most of the time what we see is not authentic. I even shared where there was an interview with the photographer that did the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. And she was sharing, like, those women usually have corsets on underneath their swimsuits. Wow. They're taped up, they're photoshopped. And she said that she feels conflict about doing that. But that means you're a good consumer because you're always trying to actually chase a facade that you can't ever get to.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. That is crazy. Rebecca, there's also it said in your, in the book, you said being driven can become destructive. Is that more an athlete's issue, or is that more of a coach's issue or a parent's issue?
All the above. I think that is, especially in the United States, we are so workaholics, competitive. We don't really value self-care. And so we're always like, I'm doing this to better myself, whether it's in my sport, as a coach, even as a parent. Like sometimes we get that way with our young athletes. Like I'm going to give them all the competitive advantage. But as I share with my story, you don't realize you've lost your way until you're lost. Mm. And so I think that's where, like in my book and when I teach, that speed bumps are really important to make you evaluate if what you're doing is actually working. Because the majority of time when an athlete comes to me that's struggling, I'll go back to that why. Like, why did you make that change? What did you make? And did it actually work? And they'll start to be like, actually, no, I started running slower, or I found my reaction time was slower. But they keep kind of chasing, thinking if they push it a little bit further, then they'll get to that point. But really, they just get further down in deficit.
Gotcha. And how long do you think it takes for, or in your, at least, I'm sure it varies a ton, but say a person goes to the point where they got IBS, because they've been pushing, maybe they even start having like stomach ulcers and stuff because they just keep pushing, or they get, they're reasonable in training, 95%, they feel reasonable, not quite where they want to be, but every time competition hits, they just like, they don't have, their body is just on that sympathetic overdrive all the time, kind of fight or flight response. So they end up having all these symptoms show up right during their competitions and stuff. How long does an athlete need to like just pull out? I see a lot of them, they have these symptoms going on, but they feel like they can't stop training. It's like they can't, right. This is like, there's another competition coming up, or there's another season or another event come up. They feel like they can't stop training. But then they end up, I'm thinking about a particular athlete that was a very high ranking athlete of mine. And he basically ended up with a back injury, ended up with a knee injury. And all of this is from overtraining, just having, I would say, bad coaching. And then actually ended up a male athlete. He ended up really anemic because he ended up getting a stomach ulcer, just the stress of all that. But he still wants to be at that elite level. And even amongst all this, he kind of figures out ways around it, but he's never quite hitting the mark he could hit of truly that elite, but superior even to some of the elite. How long is that? 6 months? Is that a year? Is that just changing everything?
It kind of depends how many incidences they've had of that and how long they've been in it. But that's the $1 million question. I could list all the athletes that have expressed. Ryan Hall, that was predicted to be the greatest American runner of all time.
Yeah.
If you read the book, Nike Win at All Costs, like the list of athletes that talked about how they were running to the ground. Who knows what their potential could have been.
Wow.
So I would love to see a shift. And I use that example, but I didn't see any cultural change when Shalane Flanagan and Des Linden, for the first time, one was, I think, 25 years, the other was 27 years, that American women won big races. The key thing from both of them that they gave credit to was that they had been injured. Yeah. So they hadn't raced hardly at all what they normally would have. Their mileage had not stayed at where they would. And I would have thought somebody would have said, maybe we're onto something.
Yeah.
But no, then we go right back into continuing to have, all these races all the time. I would love to see more intuitive training that is matching training periodization with nutrient periodization, and let the athletes have faith that it will pay off, and then see how they do. But right now, I think of all the multiple sports, I'm just not seeing it bought into. Europe does a good job.
Yeah. What would you say, what's the difference in Europe there? Or what's the, money is the driver of all of it, right? Pretty much.
Right. But they do a much better job of having more rest days, down cycles.
Okay.
they also have a really good educational approach where before they even start educating athletes, they start from the inside out. So they work with their administration, they work with coaches, general managers, and teach them like how to take care of that athlete, how to take care of yourself. So if that athlete's starting to struggle, or if you see warning signs, you know what to look for, you know where to get them the help that they need. Otherwise, we just kind of get lost. Well, we hear that all the time, you know, in the NFL, oh, this athlete came forward, but they weren't really sure where to send him. So therefore he continued to struggle for the next year or so.
Yeah.
So I think they identify more of those overtraining syndromes before they get so severe that they have to be out for 6 months to a year.
Gotcha. And for the, say just the everyday athlete, is that, do they need all this scientific data behind them? I mean, you see, like, I think it was maybe the New York Jets and New York Giants, they were doing this, you know, using LabCorp, created this whole like blood testing system for them, and, you know, had all these things on guys all the time. Is, you know, to make sure, or people wear like the Whoop bands now to say, okay, what's my HRV and all that. Can I train today or not train today? Actually, what do you think about that whole, the idea of these technological things being able to say, yes, I'm ready to train, no, I needed a rest, or not?
I think they have their place, but we can't remove the human out of the athlete.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, so going back to overtraining, I will have them periodically collect their heart rate data. And if it's matching what they're feeling physically, then we say like, okay, we're starting to, your rate of perceived exertion is going up. Your heart rate's trending up. I think your body needs a little bit more rest. Oh, look, did you notice that your actually intake dropped here because you're so tired, you took a nap today? So I would take data from something like Bootstrap, but then also have them put it in their own words. So when they put that in a training log, tell me, like, how did you feel afterwards? Were your legs good and fresh? Did you find that you were really anxious the rest of the day? Because I love Christopher Johnson put this really well. There's training load and there's life load, and the brain and the body do not know the difference.
Yeah, gotcha. That's good.
Yeah.
So you're saying a good way for just the everyday person trying to be fit, or, you know, get more out of their body, maybe they want to run a marathon or half marathon or something like that, or do a triathlon, would they would you say that heart rate, you know, their resting heart rate, kind of checking it on a consistent basis, especially as their training ramps up, and seeing if that either one kind of goes down a little bit because they're getting fitter, or two, just maintains pretty well, is a good indicator that they're doing okay?
Yeah, and they can even use that for their own marker of health and stress. So I look for 3 things. Their heart rate upon waking, if it starts to trend up for 3 to 5 days, okay, we flag that. Then if their resting heart rate during the day starts to go down, and then if it takes longer from the time they hit their max heart rate to get to baseline when they're done with their training, that is a stressed body and a stressed heart, and we need to have more rest and more nourishment.
Yeah.
Again, that would even go for life load. If you're like during COVID and the pandemic, we were all feeling a significant amount of stress. Yeah. I bet you would even see that same response, just purely from the stress, not necessarily training.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, and could that be just, all right, you just get, you know, extra half hour of sleep a night, get an extra hour of sleep a night, get to bed a little earlier, or, you know, increase caloric intake, wholesome, you know, life-giving food intake, or, you know, or maybe all of these things, you just have to decrease your training a little bit, or you have to give yourself another rest day?
Kind of all the above, and it's really like where they're at. If they feel comfortable with decreasing their training, maybe you keep the intensity up, but you decrease the amount. We know that will still help them maintain their fitness. If they have the opportunity, maybe they're, you know, a parent and they've got a baby in the house, trying to tell them to get more sleep is not going to be realistic.
I know that.
So it may be that we need to decrease the training and increase nutrition. And if their nutrition is good, then maybe we'll look at the other factors. So it's really being able to say like what's not matching with what needs to increase, and that's where we start first.
Gotcha. are there any kind of like very specific nutrients that you find that, okay, this is something I would tell an athlete to get tested, or these couple things or something I would say you should go get that tested. You know, these are highly likely to be either deficient or could play a role in, say, getting to this REDS, this relative energy deficit way sooner than is necessary.
Yes. So that's where I call it the domino cascade. So it's not just a couple things. It's not just energy deficit. It also can be glucose availability, which means how much carbohydrate are they consuming that the brain can use as a fuel source. Then you've got kind of your leaner dominoes, which I look at as iron, vitamin D, and thyroid. Okay. When the body is underfueled, or if they're deficient in vitamin D and iron, those create what I call a metabolic tax, which means that now the body has to work that much harder because we're in an anaerobic threshold to do the job that it needs to do, which means that it burns even more calories. Okay. So a lot of clinicians will say, well, they should be able to get it from food. But to me, if we're spinning our wheels and going nowhere because they continue to be iron or deficient anemia, we have to correct that and correct the energy deficit at the same time.
Gotcha. That's good. That's good. The tax there, that extra tax. You don't want to pay any taxes you don't have to pay.
No. When you start talking taxes, most people are like, well, no, I don't want that.
So the U.S. Olympic trials just went down, and then hopefully it's going to work out and Tokyo happens. Is there anything that you can do you watch that much? When
I can, I need to like make sure pre-record so I can do them at my own leisure.
Yeah. Is there anything you say you can see or you notice or even some things that these coaches or athletes, they're specifically doing right now that's going to like help one athlete just get that extra, 0.1 second or whatever they need to excel at Tokyo versus say what they did in Olympic trials?
Really probably trusting their coach.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times athletes get themselves in trouble because they get so nervous when you've got something on the line like the Olympics that if a coach said, hey, I need you to take this week really easy, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I might lose everything that I've worked for. And then keeping in that self-care, making sure they're getting enough sleep, not getting overly stressed. I love the stories of like athletes' rituals that they do because I think sometimes, again, that path from driven to destructive, they want to perfect everything, which includes sometimes foods, and they forget that food is pleasure, it's connection with teammates, it's connection with family.
Yeah.
And so I like for my athletes to share the stories of like, hey, did you see, and it was during the Winter Olympics, somebody's talking about how they had their sea salt chocolate chip cookies. That was their grandma's recipe that she would have for every afternoon snack. One, because it brought her joy, but two, is also a nice energy dense snack that she could get in when she got it from skiing. So the other part is I love seeing all these athletes of varying strong, different body sizes that aren't as stereotypical as we see that media likes to pay attention to.
Yeah. I'm thinking it's the 10-kilometer men's race I was watching, and it was super interesting. Even just how, like, one of the gentlemen that actually finished third, he's going to the Olympics, but his stride looked like, I was like, that doesn't look pretty. Like these other two guys they look pretty, but yet this guy's like right there with them, and you think, man, we should go and change up all his stuff and everything, and to make him do it like these other guys, like, because they look like, wow, they're just not wasting any energy and that, but like that's just how his body works. And it seems like, for a lot of athletes, often parents, coaches, other athletes like try to change them to make them be like what the prototype you're talking about, when in reality, like that's how their body's going to function the best. If like lay off them.
Yeah, and definitely would not change anything right before the Olympics.
So true. Do you have a favorite like grouping of Olympic events you like, or?
Oh my gosh, there's almost so much. So obviously track and field is always fun. Basketball. I grew up showing horses, so it's kind of fun to watch the equestrian as well.
Uh-huh.
Then I even get caught into like some of the other sports like Simone Biles and
Yeah.
gymnastics, and I like them all. I
Mm-hmm,
probably won't
mm-hmm.
get any work done.
Yeah, yeah. It's totally understandable. It's totally
Mhm.
understandable. So Rebecca, is there anything you would leave? I think especially the everyday athlete. I would say 75% of those that I would see are definitely female. That you say, this is the thing just to think about when you're wanting to get to the level you're wanting to get to. Whatever, if you want to be, yeah, varsity basketball player, you want to be, get a college scholarship to run track. Like this is kind of like the idea you want to try to keep in your mind as you go for that.
Take it serious, but not too serious. So do everything that you can, but remember that pleasure, enjoyment, and being a human being is part of this. And if you feel like something is off, don't dismiss it. 99.9% of the time, when I go through my timeline with my athletes, they'll say like, well, yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. I was starting to have, stomach upset after my runs and I couldn't eat, but I just thought, oh, that's part of my training. Well, then there starts the domino effect where they could have gotten things resolved earlier. There is no such thing as a little thing.
That's good. That's good. All right. So Rebecca's book is called Finding Your Sweet Spot. And it sounded like you may be having another book coming out in the near future.
Yes, I've co-authored with a sports psychologist that's actually on transitioning out of sport, those that may be struggling with eating disorder, body image, exercise. So it's kind of almost a journaling prompt workbook.
Okay, awesome. Way to go.
Yeah.
That's great. And then we'll put all of Rebecca's information because Becca McConville.com, is that your main place people can find you? And then, yeah, it'll all be below, all about her. She's got some cool stuff, great one-liners that you can just like stick in your brain when you're out there trying to drive beyond maybe what your body should be doing at that point. All right, Rebecca, thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much.
me on.